welcome to Crime in Court. My name is Heather, and this is the 1993 Menendez brothers trial. We are rewatching the trial of the boys, Erik and Lyle Menendez, who are on trial for the homicides of their parents, Jose and Kitty, who maltreated them horribly. So, this is more of a case of was it self defense or wasn't it? So that is their defense. They believe that they did it out of fear, or they not just believe that, but that is what the therapists have said. Many therapists have come on the stand, expert witnesses for the defense, and talking about the effects of severe maltreatment growing up in that household, what it could do to your psyche, all sorts of horrible things. So we are finally through the defense's case, except for the testimony of Lyle and Erik. So today we are finally here at Erik, or sorry, we're going to do Lyle first in order of their birth. We're going to go with Lyle first, who is the oldest, and then we will go with Erik and dissect it as we go along. So here we go. They call Lyle to the stand.
Spell your last name.
Joseph Lyle Menendez, Menendez.
Mr. Menendez, are you related to Erik Galen Menendez, who's seated here?
He's my brother.
And were your parents Mary Louise Menendez and Jose Menendez?
Yes.
And were you born January 10th, 1968?
I was.
If you look to the right, you will see various photographs of homes that you lived in. Do you recognize that chart as something you've seen before?
Yeah.
Do you remember the Wexford Terrace home in which you are pictured in a bassinet? The one in New York?
No, I don't.
And do you remember Cedar Grove, New Jersey? The second photograph.
No.
Is the first home you remember Hinsdale, Illinois?
Yes.
For the record, could we have the exhibit number, please?
So I do want to point out that it's also common for children who grew up maltreated or who experience some kind of maltreatment that they block it out or lose that part of their memory, or they lose sections of their memory that might be not necessarily related to the maltreatment, but around that time frame. So if the maltreatment happened when you're 8, you might not remember a whole bunch of things around that time frame of when you were 8, not just the maltreatment itself, but living in that house. You might have blocked out everything from 8 and younger. Memory works a really strange way, and it helps to protect you. And sometimes that way of protecting you is by blocking out certain memories. So I just wanted to point that out since he didn't remember a couple of the houses that he lived in, although he could have just been too young, but I don't know.
Well, we'll get it later on. That's the exhibit that has photographs of various houses in it.
Thank you, Ron.
Thank you. Can you remember when you lived in Hinsdale, Illinois?
Yes.
And what do you remember from that point in time? Do you remember your father?
Yes.
What do you remember about your dad from that period in time?
I remember in the winter, and I remember lots of things.
Do you have any particular good memories of your dad at that point in time?
Yes.
Could you tell us one?
I remember the little dog, Tristesse. I was a puppy at that time. I remember Her and my dad playing in the snow, and me running out to my dad and jumping on him and playing in the snow. I remember riding my bike.
Did your Aunt Terry and Uncle Carlos live nearby?
They lived across the street.
And did you used to ride your bike over to their house?
Yes.
And do you remember your little brother living in that house with you?
Yes.
And do you remember anything with regard to your little brother and him going over to your aunt and uncle's house?
I remember going over to get him when my mom told me he was over there. He wasn't supposed to be.
We heard testimony from the aunt and the uncle that he would sometimes walk over there in the mornings or at night, and he'd be missing, and the family would be wondering where he went, and he went to his uncle's house, his aunt and uncle's house, which was just across the street. So apparently Lyle would have to go get him.
Go get him and bring him back.
And do you have good memories of your mother also? Can you remember anything good about your mother?
Yes.
What do you remember that's good about your mother?
I remember in this house.
No, not necessarily.
Actually vague and irrelevant.
Why don't you try to focus a little bit?
Do you have something in particular that stands out in your mind that's a good memory of your mother?
I remember Christmases. Her, she was always up, it seemed, and she would be up when I got up, and then she would take us down to open the presents, even though my dad would sleep in. So we got to do that. That was usually a nice day.
I'm surprised Jose was like, yeah, sure, have your Christmas without me. What? I'm surprised. Just for the fact that he likes to control everything, so I'm surprised he wasn't there to like watch everything and control it all. So yeah. Plus, being somewhat of a narcissist or having some kind of personality disorder, being left out of the family events would probably enrage him, is my thought. I would think he would get mad about that, but that's just me. What do you guys think?
And I remember her taking care of the birds that would hit the window. Especially in Muncie, the birds would hit the window and be kind of like hurt or wounded in some way. And she would put them in a special cage she had for birds that did that. And she was just amazing with the birds.
So she nursed birds back to health, but she was a crappy human to her and a crappy mother. Crappy human and a crappy mother to her children. But she could nurse birds back to life. That's fine.
I remember watching.
Did you love your mom and dad?
Yes.
And on August 20th,
Is it weird she shows more affection to the birds than she does her own son? I mean, sons, both of them.
1989, did you and your brother kill your mother and father?
Yes.
Did you kill them for money? Is that
What's your
no?
answer?
No.
Did you kill them because you wanted to pay them back for the way they had treated you?
Excuse me, I reject that as being reading.
Overruled.
No.
Why did you kill your parents?
Because we were afraid.
We were afraid.
Do you have a lot of nice memories from your childhood?
No.
Did you get to spend time at your grandparents' house?
Yes.
And was this your father's mother and father? Okay, yes.
Yes.
What was good about being at your grandparents' house?
Everything was good about it. Um, my grandmother was wonderful. And, we stayed in bed all day and watched TV. Just be like a never-ending stream of foods that we weren't supposed to eat. We watched the...
That is what grandmas are for, right? I mean, spoil them, give them good food, give them, I mean, not good for you food, but good tasting food, and like the candy and the sugars and the mac and cheese and the stuff that you're not supposed to eat all the time, pizza, but all the good stuff that we still eat as an adult, but just not as much. Anyways, that's what grandparents are for, right? And it sounds like he's tearing up in his eye. You can see the way it's glistening in the light. He's tearing up thinking about the good times he had at his grandparents. He probably found his grandparents' house to be like his only place of safety when, he didn't have that in his household. So going to his grandparents, like you just said, they slept all day, they binged TV. So they were able to be kids. They were able to have a normal, a sense of a normal childhood when they stayed at their grandparents, which is exactly what they needed. They needed that comfort and love from their grandparents and support, and they didn't get that from their parents. So it feels this emotion's very raw. And I'm not speeding up the boy's testimony because I don't feel like it would be in character with, I've sped up everything else because it's a long ass trial and I like to watch things sped up. So I apologize for those who like it a little slower. You can always slow it down on the little gear icon. However, for the boys' testimony, I always call them the boys, and I feel so bad because they're grown men, like older than me. But now they're memorialized as these young kids still. Um, but, or kid to me, anyone in their 20s is still a kid, even though they're adults right now. But anyways, so yeah, so it looks painful, and these emotions are raw. Um, so yeah, I just wanted to point that out.
My grandfather would come in whenever the Untouchables came on. We would watch that, and it would be a big deal. And then we'd go out, and the house was great. She had a magnolia tree outside. We'd climb up that, play with her in that, and
Big boy.
there'd be a little patio.
The thing that they didn't get to do at all with their family, that whenever they had free time, they were always playing tennis or swimming or doing some kind of sport or recreational activity that their dad put them up to or approved of. This is totally different. They get to climb trees, they get to play with squirrels. They would, eat whatever junk food they wanted, sleep in. This sounds like a great memory.
That was enclosed, and squirrels would be jumping from tree to tree, and my grandfather would laugh and tell us stories, and we'd watch that. We'd go to garage sales with my grandmother. There's lots of things.
Was this different?
He had more good memories. I just want to point out he was he easily could come up with good memories with his grandparents, many, many, and he could keep going. He was still going. But with his parents, he struggled for a good memory. Just, if you missed it, go back and watch it again. He really did kind of struggle to come up with good memories about his parents, whereas his grandparents, oh yeah, they did this, we did that together, look at all the things we did. Whereas, because there's examples of good memories that he has, right? But with his parents, he didn't. It wasn't fun living in that house. It was more, if anything, it was the opposite of fun, whatever that is.
From the life you had in your own home?
It's like a different world from my house.
Different world.
You said you have some memories of the Hinsdale home. You remember riding your bike and bringing your brother back. You were about 4 years old when you moved out of Hinsdale, is that right?
Yes.
And then you moved to Muncie, is that correct?
Yes.
And once you moved to Muncie, did sports become an important part of your life?
Well, they were everything to my dad, and that was my whole life at that time.
And was doing what your father wanted of you important?
That's what made him happy, and that's what I wanted to do.
Why did you want to make him happy?
So he would love me.
So he would love me. I wanted to make him happy so he would love me. That's conditional love. That's not healthy, normal relationships. Especially a parent is supposed to selflessly love a child and always and not necessarily ask for it back in return. You know, it's supposed to be selfless, especially a parent to a child. Whereas in this household, he had to work for his parents' love and affection. Well, no, he didn't even get affection. He got attention. He had to do what he did for attention from his dad because his dad didn't really show love. His dad showed it by always yelling at them, setting them aside and being in their face and giving them a good talking to while they just sat there and listened and things like that. So he was, and make them answer trivia questions during dinner time. They would have Jose would ask questions of the boys constantly during dinner time. It wasn't like a nice family relaxing meal. It was Jose would ask the boys to go and find this answer for something, and then the first one wins, whatever they win, I don't know. But probably Jose's affection or attention for that night. And I don't mean that night, like that. I just meant like that evening. And then, because as far as I know, the abuse with Lyle ended when he was young, and then it started with Erik, and so he stopped with Lyle. And then Lyle, that's why Lyle was so angry because he didn't know that he was doing it to the brother, and not just angry, but, scared for their lives that this man was always going to control and abuse and take advantage of them and manipulate them and hurt them. So he was fearful. Anyways, sorry, I went on a rant.
What's the
But
first
yeah,
sport you remember?
conditional love from his father. So he had to play these sports in order to receive love and attention from his dad. Good, positive attention.
Getting involved in on an organized basis?
Swimming.
Can I have the lowest photograph? How old were you when you started swimming?
I think 4 years old.
And was this just a matter of going to the pool and swimming for fun, or was this more organized?
Well, we had a coach, and my mom would take us. And in the winters, we would go indoors and practice with the older kids. Or actually, that was just me at that point. Eventually, my brother and I.
And is this something where you had a half-hour lesson every week, or was it more frequent than that?
In the summer, it was every day, and in the spring, probably almost every day. But in the winter, it was whenever the classes were, the practices was just like 3 times a week.
3 times a week.
And then sometimes my dad would take me on his own.
Now, when your dad would take you on his own, was it the same type of training session that you'd have with swimming teachers, or was it different?
It was very different because swimming, basically the coach just is calling out the laps or the kind of things that you should do, and he might occasionally come over and help someone that's having a problem with a particular stroke or something of that sort. But with my dad, it was very, it was one-on-one, and he'd stay in the pool with me and swim next to me, and sometimes we would play, or it would just be him and I for, usually they gave you an hour. It was like hour free time swimming, and I would take that time to train with my dad.
And were these good times for you or bad times?
Sometimes it was good.
And sometimes it was bad? And what was it like when it was bad?
Well,
You guys want to talk about it?
I didn't really like the swimming. And sometimes he was rough with the swimming.
What do you mean he was rough with the swimming?
Sexually irrelevant.
I'm sorry?
Sexually irrelevant.
Overruled. You can ask your question.
Irrelevant.
It was like they were just drills, and I would swim laps, and sometimes he would just yank me out of the water by my hair, and he would shake you, and he took it very, very seriously.
Yank him by the hair.
He had,
out of the water.
he was training to be an Olympic swimmer at one point, and so he had all kinds of different methods and how to expand your lungs and how long I should be able to hold my breath. And we practiced him holding me under the water, how long I could take it.
What do you mean how long you could take it? Would he say, I'm going to hold you under for 30 seconds and then you go under, or what would that be like?
We would go under, and I would fight him to get air, and then he would give me air. And we would keep doing that, and I would be able to do it less and less time.
Are you freaking kidding me? What? He would hold him underwater while Lyle fought to get air to come back up, and Jose would hold him down. Are you freaking kidding me? Wow. I mean, I don't even know what to say to that. That is horrific. That's why he doesn't want to talk about it. It's horrific. It's traumatizing.
It was very rough, and
What do you mean you would fight him to get air?
I would just push away from him or pinch him or do whatever I could, hit him underwater. My dad was unaffected by all that, so it didn't. That's what he wanted me to do. He wanted me to fight to get air so that I could go beyond what I would normally just take if he said stay underwater as long as you could.
What a piece of SHIT. What a piece of crap his father is. He liked the fight. He liked the struggle. I guarantee he liked it because he was in control. So gross. I don't understand people like him, abusers like this. I just don't get it.
And this would expand my lungs. And there were other things that made it, for me, rough. And I just was so nervous about swimming. It wasn't just my dad either. Just the practices themselves made me very nervous. The older kids the guy would be blowing whistles, and you would have to dive in. And I didn't like the water. It was always very cold, and it was, for some reason, I didn't like it.
When your dad would hold you under and make you fight to get air, how would you feel when you finally got up to the surface?
Just relieved to get air.
Would you physically have any effects?
I would be crying. This would be very rough, like I said. And
Crying.
What did your dad do when you'd come up crying?
take a short break. We usually wait 30 seconds or so. We'd do it again.
And how many times would you do these lung expanding exercises?
That way we wouldn't do it too many times. And we would try to do it a couple times a week. And then we would test a couple times a week if I could go farther, like swim a whole lap underwater and then come back, and how far I would get. And we would try to go farther.
This is a really good example of how Jose was abusive about everything, just, in general, how he was abusive, not just that he did what he did to Erik behind closed doors, but in general, he liked the control. He liked having that person, dependent on him, I think, for life, for his heir. I mean, how sick is that? It's really messed up. And that's your child.
And what ages were you when these exercises were going on?
I'm not sure, but by between 6 and till about 10, I would say, maybe a little bit longer.
And do you have any other memories of swimming that are painful for you?
The whole thing was very bad for me, and mostly I remember pleading with my mother not to take me, stalling so I would be late, incredible stomach aches, I think from nerves, where I would be nauseous, and I would vomit.
What would your mom say when you'd ask her to not make you go?
She would just say, "Get ready, let's go," and she would always threaten me with telling my dad.
That'll
But
do it.
when it came to the swimming, I was pretty resistant. I didn't seem to care as much as I did normally. I was pretty crazed about the swimming. It made me so nauseous and nervous. The drilling, the intensity, the underwater stuff was very hard for me. I remember purposely swimming into the wall in practice so that I would be injured, so that the coach would say, "Okay, you can sit in the locker room and miss the afternoon sessions." And I would do all kinds of things anything to get out of it.
Was there any particular reason that swimming was so important? You said your father had trained.
Well, my grandmother, I had heard, was a champion swimmer. Even my dad's sisters, who were less into sports, were very good swimmers. And he was training to be an Olympic swimmer at the time that he had to leave Cuba. And he felt he could have gone all the way. And at least in the beginning, he felt that I could. And then that just clearly wasn't going to be.
Did you start playing soccer at some point in time?
Yes.
How old were you?
I was, my grandfather was out there with my dad, working with me by the time I was 5 also.
Did you like soccer?
I really like soccer.
Your Honor, I have 3 pictures I'd like to put up which have already been marked. They're exhibits 192, 193, and 194, if I may approach.
And also, perhaps you can identify the exhibit by the number on that one that we've had reference to already.
This is exhibit 148.
How long did you play soccer?
Until I was in my 11 years old, between almost 12.
Was your dad as involved in your soccer playing as he was in your swimming?
Yes.
And what kind of involvement did you have? Or did he have with your soccer? Just coming to the games, or was he more involved in that?
No, my dad was there whenever I played soccer, which we usually reserved for when he was there, because it was technical for him. He had a certain way he wanted me to play, and didn't feel it was productive for me just to be kicking a ball around when he wasn't there. So soccer, I waited till he was around.
Now, when you were playing soccer, I presume there was a coach?
Not when I was 5, but eventually there was, like by the time I was 7, I would think.
And once you were on an organized team with a coach, did your dad's involvement stop?
No.
Well, how would your dad behave when you were playing organized soccer?
In practices, he would be very involved, and the coaches would allow that. Pretty much it would be like a private lesson with him, and then the team was playing also. You know, he would be yelling things from the sidelines. Sometimes he would come out and
So the coaches just let him. All these coaches for all these sports that he's played just let him basically beat up his own kid in the guise of, I'm teaching him a sport, but I'm holding him underwater so he can't breathe and he's struggling to come up, or I'm on the sidelines yelling at him and embarrassing him totally in front of his could be friends, but I don't let him have friends. Wow, this guy is, I don't like Jose, if you can't tell. Um, but it's crazy how um the boys still have this idea that, they got to please their dad. They got to get their dad's attention and approval, even though they know that their dad's just not quite right. But they don't see it the way that we're seeing it as, it's definitely crossing a line, whereas he's seeing it as my dad was just trying to push me to do better type of mentality. So he, in his mind, he switches it for the positive, whereas us outsiders are looking at it, we're going, yeah, that was not so good.
grab me and take me off the field and talk to me, put me back in, and the coaches would pretty much ignore him, both of us, and we would play. And I was getting a lot of extra training, and so I was at a level where it seemed like that was why the coaches would be tolerating that, because I would be one of the better players when the game started, and a big help to the team. So they basically just let my dad do what he wanted to do. And,
Did you get to be friends with the other kids on the team?
no, not really.
Why not?
I just didn't spend any time with him, and my dad didn't want that.
Why not?
It's just part of his philosophy. If I started becoming friendly with these other players, I wouldn't be competitive.
Such crap.
If the
Especially when the people on that you're trying to befriend are on your own team. There's nothing wrong with building team camaraderie rather than, being the odd man out and solo and not connecting with any of your teammates. That's even more strange.
if your team lost, would they all get together and go to the pizza parlor afterwards, even though they lost?
They would.
Did you get to go?
No.
What was your dad's philosophy about that?
He was very belittling of the coach for allowing and the players to be going to pizza parlors to hang out after a loss. And he believed all through sports that the people that win are the ones that hate losing. And the idea that there would be smiles on kids' faces after they lost a game was really, it's just outrageous to him. And if I even went near anybody, or, you know, I had to look, and would purposely look pretty devastated after matches, pretty similar.
He had to fake his emotions. This is what people do in these situations. You have to fake your emotion for the benefit of the other person, because if you have the wrong emotion, according to them, they're going to freak out on you. But you have to pretend you're upset because they're upset. Do you see? Or they're happy, so you have to pretend to be happy. It- Kids growing up in this type of environment learn to adapt very quickly. So he doesn't get to go hang out with his teammates and go to the pizza parlor. And not only that, but he has to fake his emotions and go home with his dad and then deal with his dad, because whenever they had a loss, he got berated and told, these are the things you should have done. And so a loss to him, he knew was he's going to be punished in some form or fashion by Jose.
To that picture, that my dad would be satisfied, because he would be very angry.
Did your dad take losing a soccer game when you're 8 years old as seriously?
It was very serious to him.
Why?
Well, partly because what I said before, he had his own dreams, and he wanted me to achieve those, and because I was the most important thing in his life. And what I did was serious.
Why were you the most important thing in his life?
I don't know, that's just the way it was.
Did it have something to do with your place in the family, or was your brother as important to him as you were?
No. My brother was unimportant.
How could you
He
tell
pretty
that?
much believed in, well, he did believe that the firstborn was the one that carried the line. I carried my dad and his dad and his dad and his dad's first name, Joseph or Jose. And that was really all he cared about. And
My heart breaks for Eric. He's sitting there saying how his dad didn't care for Eric, and Eric's just sitting there watching this and has to listen to this. I mean, my heart breaks. Like, Eric already knew and felt that he wasn't important to his dad, but to hear it spoken out loud, it's got to be from your brother, your older brother, who you also look up to. It's got to suck. I feel so bad for the both of them.
to some degree, I felt that was similar feelings from my grandparents and everybody around, that the focus seemed to be on me, and that might be partly because my dad's focus was on me. But
Notice he just slipped up there and called him Jose and not my dad at first. Calls him by his first name. I wonder if that was him distancing himself perhaps from the crimes, or just from the person because of how Jose treated him. And now he's, distanced himself from that relationship, that control. So maybe now he's like, I'm not going to call him my dad anymore. I'm going to call him Jose. I don't know. But for whatever reason, he calls him Jose by his first name and not my dad.
I'm not really sure why else.
So you got a lot more attention than your brother, is that right?
Well, I had his complete attention, and I don't think my brother, I didn't even think about my brother really didn't even exist for me until later in life. I don't think either of us thought about Erik too much.
So he was just ignored.
Oh, God, this breaks my heart. We're only like 20 minutes in the first. I mean, I've been talking a lot, so I'm apologizing now already, but we're like 25 minutes into this thing, and already I'm struggling to deal with what they're talking about, and it hasn't even gotten really too much.
He was not completely ignored. Um, Dad would interact with him and be harsh with him at times, play with him at times in ways that he didn't with me. Just didn't seem to be very concerned with what was happening with Erik. He might, if he was in a bad mood, he might slap Erik or push Erik away. If he was in a good mood, he might hang out with Erik. But it was different. Like I had to be doing something. I was achieving something or something of importance, and it was very different.
Like he put all of his time.
So you
and
had more
effort.
attention, would you say there were more expectations of you?
Well, hell yeah. But it's like Jose put all of his time and effort into this one kid. And then he took all of his frustration, anger, control issues on the other kid. Weird.
You also?
Definitely.
Was one of the things that your father made decisions about with regard to your sports training the food that you would eat?
Yes.
And throughout your childhood, did his ideas about the proper foods change?
Not too much. I mean, it was always very important to him.
Okay. And what was the instruction with regard to food? Were you told what you could eat?
Yes.
Were you told when you could eat it?
No. I mean, there were some meals he felt it depended on what was happening that day. If there was a practice, it would be 3 hours before. He wouldn't tolerate 2.5 hours. It would be 3. And then there would be certain foods involved. And if there wasn't a practice and I was just going to school, I would just know the things that I had to stay away from or I had to eat. Or
Such as?
stay away from sugar, dairy products.
I wonder if these boys still I mean, I know they're in prison and it's hard to eat while in prison, but they still look very, in shape and some people gain a lot of weight in prison. I mean, not to be mean, but that's what happens because the food is so starchy and stuff. So I wonder if the things that Jose was teaching them about food really they took to heart because it seems like they're doing at least well for themselves in prison is to not be like overeating or gaining weight there. Maybe they're staying active. I don't know. Just an observation.
That changed because there were times when dairy products were a big thing. It depended on what he was reading, whatever was in the literature. If it was the Eat to Win diet, if it was something else. Usually he had books that would list what you have for breakfast, lunch, and dinner, and then like strategies for how early. But he changed his philosophy a lot because I remember him reading about Pancho Gonzalez would fast during the tournament. And so I did that for a period of time where I would just not eat for 12 hours at a time, have a small meal, not eat all day again. That wasn't working very well, so we switched.
How old were you when you were doing the Pancho Gonzalez fasting program?
13, when I was just becoming real competitive.
And you were playing a lot of tennis at that time, I take it?
Yes,
How many
it
hours?
was only tennis at that
Preteen
point.
boy.
How many hours a day were you?
A preteen boy, he would starve. Aren't boys at that age? Like, I don't know, I don't have kids, but I've heard boys at this age are like ravenous, right? I mean, and he's denying him food for 12 hours. I wonder if he could drink water. This is ridiculous.
Playing tennis.
At
The amount
13?
of abuse.
Yes.
Six. Probably like 40, 45 hours a week.
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear. 4 or 5 hours?
45, 40 hours a week.
40 to 45 hours a week? And this is and you're 13 and you're going to school also?
Wow.
Yes?
Yes.
It's all their
Now,
spare
did
time.
you sit down and talk with your dad about these food programs and sort of decide together what you were going to do in terms of your diet? Or did he decide?
I could pick out foods from the different categories.
When you say
So he had the choice of what to eat, but he had to pick it out of certain lists. He wasn't able to just freely say, I want Rice Krispie treats right now, or I want Rice Krispies for cereal breakfast. And he would say, if it's not on the list, then you can have it. I don't know. So I guess at least he had the choice to pick what was on the list, but he was still limited to these lists.
he wanted you to stay away from sugar, from junk food. That was an important theme with him, I take it.
Yes.
And if you violated that rule, would he enforce the rules?
Well, sometimes I violated the rule, yeah, and he would enforce the rules.
Was there a situation where you bought some food during the time you were playing soccer that you weren't supposed to buy?
Yes.
How old were you?
I was about 11, almost.
And what happened?
Is it at the Lawrenceville Deli? At the Lawrenceville Deli, we stopped there routinely on the way from or to the soccer fields from where our house was in Pennington. And my dad would be buying the things he felt he wanted for me, and the guy behind the counter was very friendly. They'd had the place forever, and he knew me every time I came in my soccer clothes. Basically, he sneaked me in a bag some pastries and cookies and stuff. He just sort of
No.
put it in with.
He probably had some idea that these boys were starving, and he knew, so he snuck them food. Oh, what a nice man.
Everything else my dad was buying, and I took it out when my dad wasn't looking.
Did your dad find him?
He
Yes.
found them on me outside the store.
Were you eating them?
I was eating them. Yes.
And what did your dad do?
He just grabbed them out of my hand, and he just grabbed me by the neck. He just punched me in the stomach.
Did he say anything?
No, he dragged me to the car, and I don't believe that he said anything. And I knew what was obvious.
Excuse me, Your Honor, could you ask the witness to keep your voice up?
Yes, if you could speak up a little bit.
For eating a sweet, eating a pastry, his dad grabs him by the neck, punches him in the stomach, and drags him to the car without even saying a word. That's a psychopath.
The picture that's up on the board with you in the yellow shirt, is that in the back seat of a car?
Yes.
And is that your father with you?
Yes.
And does that scene look familiar to you?
Yes.
After you, is that the shirt of a soccer team you played for?
That's the Swiss Bakery and Deli.
And that was the soccer team?
Yeah, that's one of the house league teams, not the all-star team that this picture is in here. There would be like 16 teams in the house league. Lots of boys would play, and myself. And then they would pick certain players to play on like an all-star team. This was one of the house league games. And we would wear the T-shirt of the sponsor, and that would be the sponsor.
And after you played soccer, would your dad talk to you about what your performance had been?
Yes.
And was it supportive, like you did a great thing today, or I'm really proud of you, or what would be the tone of those conversations?
No, he didn't believe in that. We worked on
He didn't believe in that, being supportive. He didn't believe it. was just funny the way he worded it, or how he said that. Like, listen to the question again. Was he supportive? Blah, blah, blah. He's like, no, I didn't believe in that. Like, no, he didn't believe in being supportive of his kids, which is true. He didn't, but it's just like so nonchalant. He's like, no, I didn't believe it.
Yes.
And was it supportive, like, you did a great thing today, or I'm really proud of you, or what would be the tone of those conversations?
No, he didn't believe in that. We worked on different aspects of the game, what I could have done. There was always things that I could have done much better. Depended if we won or lost. If we had won, if I'd scored a goal or so, and usually in these games, I would score a goal or do something significant, probably, and we would just focus on the other things that I should have done better. It wouldn't be so bad.
You said your dad didn't believe in things like that when asked you if he said complimentary things. What do you mean he?
Right? That was a weird way to respond to that. So she wants to follow up on that, which is good that she did that because it makes you wonder, like, what? He didn't believe in being a supportive father? No. No, he didn't.
Didn't believe in things like that.
He just didn't believe in praise. He just felt that you just have to keep going to the next level of play, so we could get to where we wanted to go, and that wasn't going to happen with wasting time, patting ourselves on the back, and just losing our focus on what we had as a goal, and so I never looked for praise.
Did you feel like there was a lot of pressure to live up to your dad's expectations?
Just tremendous pressure.
Did you think you could ever meet his expectations?
No, and I don't think he felt I could either.
Can I have the tennis pictures? Here, and I have 3 additional pictures which I've shown to the prosecution that I'd like to have marked as next in order.
All right, starting at 216 would be the next exhibit.
At some point, did you start playing tennis?
Yes.
And how old were you when you started playing tennis?
I started late, but I started about 6.
You put some photographs up here.
Yeah.
Do you recognize these photographs?
Yeah.
What do you recognize them to be?
That's John Camp, my coach at that time, and that's me on the right. I don't know who the other boys. Well, that looks like 6 years old. I'm just starting.
And is this were these the first formal tennis lessons you had?
Yes.
And did your dad work with you in the park before that?
Yes.
How long before you were taking these formal lessons at 6 did you start practicing with your dad in the park?
We practiced for a long time. He wanted me to learn the basics the way he wanted me to learn the basics before I went to another coach who started me a different way. And he also wanted me to get to a certain skill level where I could play with the older kids and didn't waste time with the very basic stuff that some of the coaches wanted to do, depending on the coach. But he was a really nice, softer guy and took the kids through slowly. So my dad, because we used to watch, we'd go over and we sort of watch at first because my dad would play. And he decided that we would work first on the public courts and get to a certain level, and then I could join into these drills that he really wanted me to be involved in. So that's...
You were here when your cousin Alan Anderson testified.
Right.
about playing tennis at the park. Do you remember that?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah?
Yes.
And he indicated when you first started playing, you couldn't hold a racket with one hand. Is that correct?
That's right.
Why?
Well, I was 6, and I wanted to use a junior racket. I'm actually using a junior racket in that picture, which John had at the club. And those are the types of things that John would do that my dad hated. He wanted me to use a full-size racket, and we
Say he wanted you to use a full-size racket. Who wanted you to use a full-size racket?
my dad wanted me to use a full-size racket.
Six.
And we would wrap the grip up a little bit higher, and I would hold the racket choked so that I could hold it
With 2 hands?
with 2 hands on both sides.
Were you too small to hold it with one hand?
Yes.
During the course of your playing tennis, did you have a series of coaches?
Yes.
Did you make a list at one point in time of all the coaches you could think of?
Yes.
And about how many were on there? Did you have 5 coaches or 10 coaches or 20 coaches?
No, I could remember like about 55 coaches.
Oh my God.
But I know I missed a lot because they kept coming, another one would come back to me every once in a while.
I wonder if it was like Jose didn't want to keep him around or something, or maybe Jose just butted heads with them and he didn't like him, so he would just bring in a new coach every time he got annoyed with the coach. I don't know. Being that Jose is a control freak, and it might have something to do with that. I don't know.
Would you have more than one coach at a time?
Yes.
And did you get to form any close relationships with any of these coaches?
Some of them. I mean, not really. I did have a close relationship to some degree with Brad Warner because I went to him for a long period of time. This guy was very nice to me because he would stand up to my dad somewhat, but I didn't really know him in any way.
Did your dad encourage you to get close to your coaches?
No. No, we went through coaches, just, it was high turnover with coaches. And if one started getting too friendly and talked to my mom too much, he was gone. And we just get another one.
And what if you started to get close?
Rephrase the question, please.
Who picked the coaches? Did you get to say, I like this coach, I'd like to keep him, or was this a decision your dad made?
No, either my dad or my mom would find the coach, and then I would have my first lesson, and that's when I would meet him.
And during your early years, say before you were 10, how many hours a day would you say, or how many hours a week would you say you were playing tennis before you're 10?
Before I was 10. Well, we played a lot more in the summer than in the winter. In the summer, we would split it up between the 3 sports, and I would play a little each day. And I would hit tennis almost every day. Certainly by the time I was 7, I was playing almost every day. And really, my dad was focusing on tennis and soccer because I was having a very hard time with swimming. And I might play several hours in a row, maybe like 4 hours, and then we would
Switch to the next
switch
sport.
and play some soccer, or he would go over a tape. He had soccer tapes, and then maybe we would go to the pool because we would be hot and sweaty, and then we would train in the pool for some swimming. During the school year, it was regimented because we had court time, swimming time, and I think I played tennis like 3-4 times a week, sometimes more on the weekends. And then there would be times when my dad would just decide I'd play tennis all day, and I'd do that.
In addition to the playing of tennis, you said he had tapes. Would he go over tapes with you in the various sports?
Yes, we had lots of tapes on each sport.
And would you just sit down together, father and son, and watch the tapes, or would this be some sort of a teaching session?
There would be training tapes. They would be, I used to go to a soccer camp, Patamale soccer camp, and they would furnish us with tapes there. They would have tapes of South American players giving instruction, Pele, other well-known players, I don't remember the names, but they would also have some basic American soccer instruction tapes, which weren't too good. But then we would have the tennis tapes. That would be the most extensive because he would tape all the matches, the great matches, and he would have parts segmented for me to watch, or games, or he would have the slow motion button and we would watch the service motion or whatever it was. He also had specific, like they were called Cybervision tapes made by Stan Smith, Bob Lutz, which would actually be like computerized stroking tapes and actual play that you only see like dots of the body. And I would imitate that, and we would just go through it instructionally.
Now, when you say you would imitate it, while the tape was going on, would you be doing something, or just sitting there, or?
No, we would be watching intently, and he would be telling me, see that, you know, and sometimes I would have the button, he would say go back, and he would go over to the TV and he would point to the form, see how his elbow's bent, your elbow drops too much, you have to keep it up. A million things that would just be technical oriented.
And when you would watch these tapes, would this be a 15-minute session or something longer?
Sometimes. A lot of times, like in Pennington, we would run in from practice. If I had done something wrong, he would say, come on. And we would go into the house, turn on the tape, and he'd find the segment that pertained to whatever I had done wrong or he wanted me to do. And then we would go back out. Other times it would just be at night. If it was raining and we were supposed to play outside or something.
Like Jose lived and breathed sports through his sons. Like all he cared about. It's so bizarre. And it's a control thing too with both of them. I don't know. Because he was an Olympic or wanted to be an Olympic swimmer, he had to use that to train his kids to do sports they didn't want to do.
Like that. Any kind of filler time, we would just watch the tapes. We watched the same tapes over and over and over.
Do you have time to go play with the kids in the neighborhood?
I very occasionally played the baseball on the cul-de-sac with a guy named Jerry, older kid, who let me play. And I knew another kid across the street named Tom, who was more friends with Erik, or they would occasionally play or something, but pretty much we weren't allowed off the property. And we stayed in the backyard, which had fences.
Did you have other kids come over and play with you, come in the house?
Jerry came in the house occasionally until the dog attacked him.
Was this in Muncie?
Yes.
And was the dog who attacked him Con?
Yes.
And was Con the relative of the dog who bit you on the face?
Yes.
You have a scar on your right cheek?
Yeah.
From that dog bite? So after Con attacked Jerry, was that the end of Jerry coming in the house?
Yes, it was. He was just traumatized by it because the dog was let in, and this dog was ferocious. If it smelled another person in the house, it just tore down the stairs, and he was playing ping pong with me. It came running down the stairs and just bit him in the groin, and it was this huge dog fight, and my mom separated Jerry and the dog and got the dog by the jaws, and Jerry left, and I almost never saw him again.
Would you want to go?
Jerry, you mean?
Yeah,
The dog stayed with you, though.
yeah.
Wow.
Did you eventually have to get rid of the dog?
Eventually, the police said that we had to destroy Con because of
Because-
various violent incidences with the dog and other dogs and other people. And my dad didn't want to do that. And he had this idea that if he gave it away for a while, he might be able to get it back when things calmed down. So we gave it to a family that had, I think, much older kids. I think they were college kids or whatever, on like a farm type of. And then I heard that the dog had been destroyed eventually for more problems.
Getting back to your tennis. When you would be playing, when you would be practicing, would your father be there participating in your practices?
In tennis?
Yes.
Yes. Not every time, but most of the time my dad was there. Anytime he could be there, he would be there.
And when you were playing in tournaments, was your father there?
Yes, or he would fly in, and a lot of times I remember I would start the first couple points, and then I'd see my dad show up in a business suit, having just arrived.
Would you be glad to see him?
Yes.
That's a yes and no. That's a mixed feeling answer. I can't totally answer that honestly, so I'm just gonna go with, yeah. Yeah, I missed him. Like a kid misses their dad. But I think when you have someone like that in your life, your body is going to tense up when you see them because you're so used to being in a state of tension just by being in their presence. So I think he's being a little disingenuous, although I mean he's not lying, but he's not telling us that he's also fearful for, what's to come.
The pressure that his dad
Did
was-
he make it more fun for you to be in tournaments?
No.
Why not?
Well, whenever my dad was around, it was very heavy pressure, and I preferred to be just with the coach. But for some reason, when I was away from my dad, I had trouble playing. And so I remember the semifinals of one big championship tournament with a rival that I had beaten earlier in the spring in front of my dad easily. This was a big match, there were like 50 people watching, and I lost 6-0, 6-0. And my coach looked at me like, oh my God, how are we going to tell your dad? And, he was like pale, and sometimes I just couldn't play if my dad was not there, and I don't know, sometimes it was the nerves of just having to explain to him the match.
What do you mean, explain to him the match? If your father wasn't there, would you have to tell him about the match?
Every game, exactly how the match progressed.
Now, when you say exactly how the match progressed,
You had to give him details. You had to give him specifics of what happened in the game.
would you call your father at work or see him when he got home? How would you tell him?
I call him immediately. He wanted to know immediately.
So would he be at work?
He would normally be either at home or sometimes he would be. I guess at tournaments he was mostly at work. But I call him after practices, and I would be playing late. And he would get home and expect a call from either the coach or from me. Or we reach him at the office. His secretary would always say he's out to lunch, he's busy. As soon as he found out it was my tennis coach, he just walked in, and then he'd want everything, exactly.
So he wouldn't be around. He wasn't accessible unless it was about tennis. Get it?
The temperament.
Tell me what you would tell him.
He would talk to the coach first, and I could hear my coach saying, he did real well. I know it was a close match, depending on whatever happened. Just describe the match, kind of. And then he'd say, your father wants to talk to you. And Dad would ask me to have the coach leave the room so he could talk to me in private. And he would say, tell me what happened. I heard this, what happened. I want to know, why did this happen this way? As far as, to give you examples, like, he would say, you elected to serve first. And I'd say yes. And he'd say, okay. Did you go through the first 3 games like we arranged? Because he would have, like, exactly what I was supposed to do for, like, the first almost 25 points, where I would just have a set strategy. Sometimes it would go off during the point, but pretty much I would either serve and volley to the deuce court, stay back on the ad court. Then if it was 30-all, he'd have different strategies.
I don't know tennis. I have no idea what he just was talking about, but it sounds Tennessee.
And I'd explain to him how I followed those strategies, and he'd want to know why they didn't work out. And I'd do my best to explain in a way that didn't admit that my backhand was off or that I wasn't concentrating or things like that.
Now, would these be conversations that would last 2 or 3 minutes, or how long would you be explaining in detail what happened?
An hour and a half. About an hour.
An hour and a half for these phone calls. It wasn't just like in this round, I don't know what they're called in tennis. I know nothing about tennis. How about, like, in this round I got 3 points, and then in the next round, no, you have to be specific. You have to walk them through pretty much a play-by-play of the game. Awful. And especially if you lose, you're going to get it even worse. You're probably going to have to spend more time on the phone with Jose talking about it.
Hour and a half, because we'd also then have to go into what was happening tomorrow. He'd want to know exactly what I ate that day. Maybe it was the food that affected the match. And I would write out what I ate every time I was away from him, so we could chart whether, only bananas and so on.
He was so controlled, he had to write down everything he wrote that day, or anytime he was away from his father. He had to write down and log all of his food just so his father could review it and criticize it, critique it. No, thank you. I wouldn't want to be writing down my food log and then have someone else looking it over and critiquing it. This is insane, but parents, am I right? I mean, I guess thinking that these boys are his property, he can do whatever he wants.
1 in the morning seemed to be a winning percentage and so on. And I actually purchased a computer at one point that you could plug all these things in, and it would give you the percentages of what happened when you ate this or when you tried this strategy or how many unforced errors. And very, very, very technical with my dad.
At one point, were you the #1 player in the Middle States Tennis Association?
Yes.
Now, what is the Middle States Tennis Association? What area does that cover?
That's the 5 states, most in New York, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, West Virginia, and Delaware.
And how old were you when you were #1 in that area?
I was 17, I think. My first year of the 18 and unders.
So everybody eligible to play in that would have been 18 or younger.
Right.
And you were 17 when you won.
Right.
And do you remember when you won that? Do you remember that period of time?
I remember the year.
Do you remember, was your dad proud of you? Had you finally done enough?
He was proud of me, but by the time I could get to be #1, I mean, we were thinking nationally. and nationally I was not where he wanted me to be. So we didn't really worry about like the 5 states thing. We concentrated on the nation, what the other players were doing, and I was having trouble nationally, and that was always on his mind.
So this wasn't a great moment for you then? I mean, making a #1 ranking in the Middle States Tennis Association was not that important. Did it seem to be?
Rephrase the question, please.
Yeah. Did it seem to be important? I mean, did your dad seem to be real happy about this? Or?
He really didn't say much about it. It just happened. The rankings came up. I noticed I was #1, but again, we were thinking nationally. It was like, so what? And that was an upsetting year because we had lost again Family of the Year, tennis for New Jersey, to a family called the Leshleys, and my dad was pissed, and my mother called in and to complain and the whole thing because my brother had a very good year that year also, but we lost that, so he was very upset. Basically was upset with my brother for not having been #1 also, which would have clinched it. And he was like 5 or something, 4 or 5.
So your brother was #4 or 5. If he'd been #1, it would have clinched it, mean you would have gotten the Tennis Family of the Year?
Right.
Why don't you pick a point here when it's convenient, we'll take a break.
One more question and then
Okay.
we'll take a break. Did your sports activities seem to take up all of your dad's free time?
It took up any time he wasn't working. Yeah.
And did your mother ever express any resentment about that?
Oh, yes, many, many times.
What would she say?
She would say many things. She would say that I ruined her life, and she would explain to me why and how I ruined her life.
What would she tell you?
She told her own son, "You ruined my life." I mean, I have no words for what these people did to these boys.
About why and how you...
So much damage, so much psychological damage, and the way that they talked to them, treated them, handled them physically, um, didn't give them the positive and loving, supportive environment alone gives them several issues within their psyche and probably anxiety and, depression, so many different things going on within their minds.
ruined her life?
Well, if she wasn't in a tantrum and she was just speaking normally, she would just explain all the things that she could have been: an actress, broadcasting. I learned about her aspirations with disappointments with not being a child actress and wanting to go on in some acting or broadcasting sense. And she told me that she had a job in New York to be a hostess at a restaurant, that she said she could make almost $50,000 a year, and that then suddenly she had gotten pregnant, that she had not wanted to get pregnant, that my dad had then forced her, gave her an ultimatum: either you leave or you stay home with my son and quit. And so she chose to stay home, and essentially her life was pretty much ruined from that point on. But then we would have more.
So you leave. She didn't want kids. Let's go back up a bit. Say
To
this
be a
again.
hostess at a restaurant, that she said she could make almost $50,000 a year, and that then suddenly she had gotten pregnant, that she had not wanted to get pregnant, that my dad had then forced her, gave her an ultimatum: either you leave or you stay home with my son.
So you leave this marriage and go off and do your $50,000 a year job that you want so badly. Like I'm saying it like I'm Jose, like you go do that, or you stay home with my son, and I'll take care of you and give you everything you've ever wanted. I'm sure he told her something along those lines.
and quit. And so she chose to stay home, and essentially her life was pretty much ruined from that point on. But then we would have more discussions about how much money was being spent on my tennis, all my dad's time.
All the time and energy and money that Jose is putting into Lyle, she's jealous of. That's probably all the stuff he promised her. If you would stay in this marriage and raise my son, I'll give you all these things. And now she's seeing him pouring his love and adoration on, well, I don't think I don't think Jose or Kitty can actually love, but he's the dad is showing all of his, attention for Lyle, and the mom is not getting any anymore.
On my tennis, who cares? And then I would hear about the lessons she couldn't have, the things that she couldn't have. And then there would be other times when she was in a tantrum. Then it would just come out very, in a rage.
What would come out in a rage?
She would be throwing things and screaming and flailing and wanting and trying to hit you and saying that you're a bastard. And she cursed a lot. And then wait till your dad gets home. I'll tell him the things that you didn't do today. And
It's the second time he's brought that up, so I think she threatened that a lot. That she was going to tell Jose on him, like tell on him to Jose if, try to get him in line.
you were never born, and why can't you be like your brother, and what's the matter with you? And then I would try to say something. She would say, shut up, I don't want to hear it. You're stupid, I hate you.
How old were you when you heard things like, I wish you were never born?
So, 7.
7.
That's the end of that area now.
Okay, we'll take a recess, ladies and gentlemen, and we'll resume at 15 minutes after the hour. Don't discuss this case with anyone. Don't form any final opinions about it, and we'll resume at 3:15. And all the jurors are back in court, and we're ready to proceed. The witness is on the witness stand. You may proceed with your questioning.
Lyle, as you were growing up, and I'm directing your attention now to when you were living in the Muncie house and then later in the Pennington house, were there pornographic films that were made available to you and your brother?
Yes.
And where did these films come from?
My dad brought them home with other videos.
And would you and your brother sneak and watch them, or how would you see them?
No, my dad we would just watch them together.
With your dad? And what's the earliest age that you remember being shown films like this?
I remember some films in Muncie at the end. Mostly I remember in Pennington House.
And what types of things would be portrayed in these films?
It was mostly violence, sexual violence. I remember a whole bunch of the films. There would be films with gang rapes. There was one film centered around a woman that was riding her bike and was abducted and brought to a forest and gang raped. And there was another different film where there was 3 females attacking another female, and the same in the men's locker room with 3 guys and another guy, violent sexual acts. And there was another film that was, it was like a film within a film, where this filmmaker was making a lot of money selling these violent sexual pornography that he would take place in a red room. And then the premise of the film is they eventually find out that the killings and the sexual violence in the red room is real, and that's why the films are so good. And there were lots of them.
Did your father show these films to other people beside you and yourself and your mother?
Only as like in a just shock value.
How do you mean? Who would he show them to?
He showed them to that I remember Peter Goldsmith. He showed them to the neighbors in the Pennington house when they would come over at times. It seemed like he would tell me in advance he was going to do this, and it was more to embarrass my mother than anything else. But he would just put up this video, and people would sort of settle in, and then he'd shock them.
Really, that's how he would entertain guests and to embarrass his wife and force his children, young children, to watch these films.
He showed them for.
Evil does live. I mean, evil does exist. If you ever wonder, evil and good, evil is on Earth, and it's people like Jose and Kitty Menendez.
Some of my friends that would come over every once in a while, he'd just throw one on, and it really wasn't very bothered by him, and we would watch them together.
Do you ever take photographs of you and your brother?
Yes.
And what would the circumstances be in which he would take photographs?
He would take photographs of us, our private parts.
And would he have you come in and pose for these photographs, or how would that happen?
I would just, if we were in the showers or bathtub or changing, he would just use the same camera that my mother used, and then he would come in and take just a photograph or two, and he wouldn't say anything, and then he would leave.
Do you ever show you those photos?
No.
Excuse me. Here, I have some photographs. I have shown to the district attorney and K. Markson, police commission.
How many are there? And just for the record, what are the markings that you put on them?
We have, may I do it from up here so I can show it to you all at the same time?
Okay, please refer to.
I'm sorry, Mr. Menendez.
All right.
Mr. Menendez, I'm showing you a Kodak color prints envelope with the number 219 on it. Would you take a look at that? Do you recognize the handwriting on the front?
That's my mother's.
And what does it say?
Eric's birthday, November 1976.
And in November 1976, how old would you have been?
8.
And on the back, there's a sticker.
That's the Muncie house, 4 Harlow Lane, Muncie, New York.
Is there anything in that envelope at this
It's
time?
empty at
Okay.
this time, Your Honor.
All right.
The next would be,
Did you want to mark that envelope?
it's marked 219, Your Honor.
All right.
The next would be 220, which is a envelope containing negatives. Next is a series of small photographs, which we marked 221A through G.
Why they keep having audio issues? We can skip through this anyway.
Marked 222 through 233, which is marked as 2. Have you been shown this proof sheet already?
Yes.
Your Honor, I now have the enlargements which go in order off of the proof sheet, off the negative. Mr. Menendez, do you recognize this photograph?
Yes.
And who are the people in that photograph?
Mom and Dad, myself, the Peralt family, children, and Aunt Terry and Uncle Carlos.
Could you just identify that for the record so that we don't have...
222, Your Honor.
All right.
He said the Peralt family and Uncle Carlos. It came up weird on the caption.
Yes.
And who is that?
That's me.
$224?
That's Erik.
$225?
What was the answer?
I don't know.
It's nothing, Your Honor. Nobody can recognize. It's just the next photo on the negative. $226?
That's Erik and myself and some other boys.
You have to
And-
speak up.
Some other boys and Erik and myself. Sorry.
And do you recognize some mark on your brother?
The birthmark? The birthmark on his right wrist. It's a large brown birthmark.
$227?
That's my father and Erik at a birthday party.
$228?
That looks like the same party with Erik and myself.
$229?
The same picture, I think, but darker.
$230?
The same picture, basically.
$231?
Looks like my mother in the background, lower half of her, and my brother with a donut.
$232?
That's Erik.
How do you recognize him?
The birthmark on his right hand.
And $233?
That's the little dog I was talking about, Tristesse.
Your Honor, may I take a moment and put the photos up?
Yes.
That your dad would come in periodically and just take pictures of you. The two photographs here, we've marked one which you've identified as yourself and the other one as Erik, which are children without clothes, also appear to be children without heads. Is that correct?
Yes.
And when he would take photographs of you of this nature, would he seem to be directed at taking photos of your faces?
No.
Or would he?
He would take photographs of your genital area, in the lower half of your body, or you bending over, or just different parts of your positions is what I never really knew.
Because you never saw them afterward, or?
What's your answer?
He would be focused on those areas, but I didn't see I've never seen these pictures.
Is today the first time you've seen these pictures? Is that yes?
Yes.
Did your dad used to have talks with you about sex between men?
Yes.
And what types of situations would he talk to you about?
He would talk about the bonding between men, going into battle or in competitions, mostly with regards to battle and history, and that sexual interaction and touching and hugging, but also sex was throughout history was something that men that had gone into battle had done together.
He's normalizing man on man encounters. Is what he's trying to do is normalize that, oh yeah, this is normal. This has been going on for centuries. Men have been having relations with other men all the time, and it's a manly thing. This is why. And so he's attaching it to this like virility and being this strong, virtuous warrior type guy. When really it's just to normalize it to Lyle.
Had me read passages about it.
What do you mean, had you read passages about it? What would he give you to read?
Excuse me, Your Honor, can we have a time period, please?
Yes.
What time are we talking about in your life?
I was talking about when I was 6.
What would he have?
Talking about men having relations with other men when Lyle is 6.
You read?
He had history books with passages outlined, various battles and strategy, but in terms of on this subject, there would be particular passages about Greeks, soldiers having had sex with each other before they went into battle as a way of bonding with each other so they have a stronger connection. And he would talk about the same thing with regards to sports and he and I.
And did he talk about fathers and their firstborn sons in this regard?
Not in this. Not that that's what. I'm not understanding the question.
Did he talk about? You said he talked about soldiers and having sex between them as a bonding mechanism.
Yes.
Did he talk about teachers and students?
No.
Did he?
Oh, yes, he did actually. Not teachers. He talked to me about. I don't know. They were like lecturers or traveling lecturers, professors, and they would have arrangements with very close special students, young boys, and they would have sex and they would touch each other.
And did he talk about it with regard to fathers and sons?
He talked about it with regard to our relationship as being very special and our family history with the firstborn and the father.
And what was special about the relationship of the firstborn and the father?
That it was special, and that that was really all that mattered, was the firstborn, and that the sons should do what the fathers say, and then they grow up and they become like the father, and the father teaches them and molds them, and someday me and my son do the same.
And between the ages of 6 and 8, did your father have sexual contact with you?
Yes.
And how did it start?
Just started with, after sports practices, he would massage me, and we would have these talks, and he would show me, and he would fondle me, and he would ask me to do the same with him, and I would touch him, and we would undress.
Where would this
And it
take
was-
place?
In my bedroom.
And how often would this happen?
Like 2 or 3 times a week.
And for how long did this happen?
Not too long. It began to change.
When did it begin to change?
I'm not sure exactly at what time, but almost close to when I was 7.
And how did it change?
Just became more involved.
What do you mean more involved?
We would be in the bathroom, and he would put me on my knees, and he would guide me, all my movements, and I would have oral sex with him.
Did you want to do this?
This is heartbreaking.
At some point, did he do some other things to you?
Yes.
What else did he do to you?
He used objects,
What kind of objects?
a toothbrush, and some sort of shaving utensil brush.
And what would he do with the toothbrush?
Well, in the bedroom, we'd have what we called object sessions, and just slide my pants down or take my pants off. Sometimes it would be for a short period of time, sometimes longer. Just lay me on the bed and he'd have a tube of Vaseline, and he just played with me.
Why? Like, oh.
And was there some point in time when he decided to use something besides the toothbrush?
Yes.
And did he try to anally penetrate you with something else?
He did.
And what was it?
He raped me.
Did you cry?
He R'd me, he said, the R word. But it said break on the caption, so I just wanted to make that clear. So he had intercourse with him.
Yes.
Did you bleed?
Yes.
Were you scared?
Very.
Did you ask him not to?
Yes.
How did you ask him not to?
I just told him, I don't. I'm sorry. I just told him that I didn't want to do this, and that it hurt me. And he said that he didn't mean to hurt me, and he loved me.
Was that important to you, that he loved you?
Yes, very. But I still didn't want to do it.
Did you tell your mom?
Yes.
What did you say to your mom?
He did.
I told her to tell Dad to leave me alone. And he keeps touching me.
What did your mom say?
She told me to stop it. And that I was exaggerating. And that my dad has to punish me when I do things wrong. And she told me that he loved me.
Did you ever tell anybody else?
When?
Did you ever tell anybody else when you were a child? You heard Diane Vandermolen testify. Do you
Yes.
remember telling her?
No.
Did you complain to your cousin Alan?
No, not about that.
Just about punishment. As a child, did you ever tell anybody else what had happened with your dad?
Yes. When I was a child? No.
Why not?
I was afraid, and my dad didn't want me to.
What did he tell you about telling people?
He just said that it was our secret. That bad things would happen to me if I told anybody.
These emotions cannot be faked. I don't care what people say. These boys, these emotions are raw, they're real, this is genuine.
And I told him I never would.
I'll go back to stay home.
If I told anybody. And I told him I never would. I never.
What did he say?
That he just said that it was our secret. That bad things would happen to me if I told anybody. And I told him I never would.
How old were you when this stopped?
8.
So during the time between 6 and 8, when this was going on, did you tell your brother? Did you do something to your brother?
Yes.
What did you do to your brother?
I took him out to the woods. Whenever I felt, I don't know, I took him out sometimes, and I took a toothbrush also, and I played with Erik in the same way. And I'm sorry.
These boys, this is not fake. All these people, like back when this happened, these boys were ridiculed, made fun of so bad in the media for crying about this thing that happened to them. Like, okay, this is horrific what happened to them, and I'd be crying too. And this is genuine and real, and I don't know how anybody can just look at these boys and uh, say the horrible things that they said about them back in the 90s. Anyways, it's heartbreaking to listen to that.
stopped for you with your dad when you were 8. When you were about 13, did you think that it might be happening to someone else?
Yes.
And who did you think it was happening to?
Erik.
And did you do something about it?
Yes.
What did you do?
I talked to my dad.
What did you say to your dad?
I told him that I knew what was going on with him and Erik, and I heard noises, and that I wanted him to leave Erik alone.
And what did he say to you?
He told me that Erik was, that Erik made things up sometimes, but that it would stop, and that we should keep it just between us, or he'd kill me.
Did you ever tell anybody what you thought was going on?
No, I told him I would never tell anybody. I just wanted to stop.
Did he tell you it would stop?
He did.
Told him it would stop. It would stop.
Leonard, that's as far as I have for today, if that's all right.
All right, you want to take a recess then at this
Yes.
point? All right, ladies and gentlemen, we
All right, so this is actually the end of part 1, but I'm going to play a little bit into part 2 because, well, hi, my dog is trying to get on camera. I'm going to play a little bit of part 2 because this was such a short video. So we're going to go into a little bit into part 2, but hold on one second because my dogs need a potty break. So stay tuned. All right, so here we are. This is part 2. I mean, we're going into the second part as far as, the person who made these videos, but we're going to continue to have a part 2 after this, continuing from where we left off. So I'm sorry to confuse you. We're just going to go a little bit longer. I switched videos and now here we go.
stand. I'll remind you that you're still under oath. Would you state your name again for the record, please?
Joseph Lyle Menendez.
All right.
Mr. Menendez, I've placed a picture up on the board. Do you recognize that photograph?
That's my dad.
That's a previously marked exhibit, Your Honor. I'll get the number at the break. You were telling us the last thing on Friday about a talk that you had with your father when you were 13 years of age. Do you remember that?
Yes.
And I believe that you told us that you had heard some noises that made you believe that your brother was being molested by your father. Is that right?
Yes.
Now, as soon as you heard those noises, did you go right up and confront your dad?
No.
What did you do?
Well, I was hearing the noises for a long period of time, and after a while, I felt that I should talk to my dad about it. And so it took me a couple days, but I finally did. One time when he came up to the bedroom, I heard him, and I sort of spent the day thinking about it, and then I went and I told him.
Okay. Why did it take you? Well, you said you heard the noises for a period of time. Did you immediately think you knew what it was?
No, I didn't know what it was when I was talking to him, really. I had just guessed.
Why didn't you go up to him immediately?
Well, I just felt that if I decided to talk to him about it, he would probably beat me up. and he would probably get incredibly angry, and he might hurt my brother. I just wasn't sure what was going to happen, and so I thought about doing nothing. I really did. I felt like at some point I didn't really have a lot of choice. I should just go talk to my dad, and maybe he would talk to me about it. And I felt like he might, and he did.
He did talk to you about it?
Mm-hmm.
Now, when you finally decided to talk to him, did you just go up and confront him right then, or did you prepare in some way?
I prepared just by sitting in my bedroom, and pretty much the same things I did when the stress level got real high. I put on this little Lionel Richie single I had, and I just turned the lights out, and I just tried to concentrate. And my dad had taught me to do this, and I tried to just relax because I was just so tense, and I wanted to be relaxed, and at the same time brace myself because I thought he would, he probably would do something to me.
Did you tell your mom you were going to talk to your dad?
No.
Did you tell your mom what you thought was happening to your little brother?
No.
Why not?
My mom wasn't going to do anything about it.
Why didn't you think your mom was going to do anything about it?
Well, at that point, I was 13, and my relationship with my mother was extremely bad, and she was really out of control, and it would just be a lot worse, I felt, if I talked to my dad about it. I also thought it'd be worse if I talked to my brother about it first, because I figured he would deny it, and then he might go to Dad. I thought it was better to just surprise my dad, just talk to him about it, and not tell anybody else. But I wasn't going to tell my mother.
Did you talk to your brother about it afterwards, that you had had this talk with your dad?
Yes.
And did he tell you that things had changed for him?
Objection, hearsay.
He said that he never admitted that anything was going on, but he said that he was glad I talked to Dad and that things had gotten better and things had changed. Didn't use those exact words, but left me with the impression that it was resolved.
Now, you talked about having this talk with your father and preparing for it. Did you have a lot of talks with your dad as you were growing up?
Many talks.
Now, were these talks where you give your ideas and he gives his ideas and there's an exchange of information? Or were they different than that?
It was an exchange of information. It depends what talks you're talking about. I mean, there were ones at the dinner table, which would be more of question answer.
Let's do that. Were there serious discussions at the dinner table in your house?
Very serious.
And starting at about what age?
Since I can remember, but certainly in the Muncie house.
And in the Muncie house, you were 6, 7, 8?
6, I think. When I was definitely 6. Maybe I was 5 too when I was there. I'm not sure.
And what would happen when your dad would come home?
Dad would.
We're talking about, okay, when you're 6 and in the Muncie house.
Right.
What was it like when your dad came home?
It was extremely tense in the house because my mother, not just because of my mother, we were very tense. I was certainly nervous about my dad coming home. He'd want to know about my whole day. We might be going out to a practice after he got home. It just depended, but whatever happened, it was going to be very intense. My dad was just that kind of a guy. It was very sharply intense. And my mother would basically start to be like a recluse in the house. Didn't want to talk to you, didn't want to even be around anybody, either go into her bedroom or just kind of hang out in the kitchen, and you stayed away from her because she was prone to just explode because she was nervous. And he would come home, and in a way it was kind of like a celebration when he came home, because Mom would be at the door and we would all run up, and usually he would kind of give me a quick hug like that, and basically just me. And then he would put his things on the ground and go to change if he wanted to put a warm-up suit on, depending what was happening.
Okay, would he hug Erik the way he hugged you?
No.
Would he hug your mom?
No. Sometimes he would say, "Hello, kitty."
Did you seem to get the special attention?
Yes.
And at the dinner table, would he have talks with you?
Yes, he'd have talks. It was basically with just me. Occasionally talk to my brother, but very rarely.
Did he talk to your mother?
So they'd be sitting there for dinner and he would just ignore Erik and only talk to Lyle?
No, my mother did not eat dinner with us. She just kind of walked around and went into the kitchen. And we always had kitchens where she could be in the kitchen, and the dinner table was right there. And she would never sit down. Or I can't remember her sitting down. But even in California, when she sat down, nobody talked to her. So.
When your dad sat down with you, would he then focus his attention on you?
Yes.
Would he ask you about your day?
Yes.
And was that standard? He said he would always ask you about your day?
Yes.
Can you show me now how that conversation would go?
Objection, Vegas to time.
We're talking when he's 6 years old in Muncie still, Your Honor.
I don't think I can remember when I'm 6.
Okay. 7? Do you remember at 7?
I remember when I was involved in the tennis at 7, and he would want to know every detail.
How would the conversation go? What would he say?
He would be at the head of the table. I would be always on his right. Actually, no, I would be on his left, and my brother would be on the right, next to the kitchen. And he would just start eating, and he would say, "So, how'd it go today?" And the ones I recall the most are the ones where it didn't even go so well. And I would say, "Oh, it went great, and I did real good today." And he would say, "That's not what I heard." I would say, "No, Dad, I did real well." And he would say, "Well, take me through the day." And I'd always start with getting up. I got up, I got ready. I did my stretching exercises before the day began.
What would you tell him about the stretching? Would you just say, "I did my stretching exercises," or would you have to be more specific than that?
Usually whatever we had decided, like the day before or that week, we were going to stretch is what I told him. I can't remember right now, but if he didn't like what I was saying, he would say, "Well, let me see what you did." And I would get up and I would just show him basically how I worked my legs and my arms and my hip area and my neck, and went through the exercises or the specific ones that he wanted. And then he would say, "Okay, that's good. You can come back." And I'd come back, and he'd say, "Okay, what happened next?" And I said, well, I got ready and went to school. And always I would forget something. And he would say, no, you just got ready and you went to school? That's it? And I said, and I would usually remember, I would say, no, I thought about my day first. I sat down like you said, and I thought about it. Sometimes it would be that I ate the foods that he wanted me to eat before, whatever it was. Usually it was like I thought about the day. He'd say, well, what did you think about? You didn't just sit there and think about your day. I said, no, I went, thought about concentrating at school, being polite. I thought about staying away from the other kids and thinking about what I was going to do after school with sports, and then what I was going to work on in the evening. And I basically went through all the things that I would normally say. And then he would say, good, good. And then I'd go through the day and I'd say, well, then I went to school and I had this first class, and he would usually say, I don't want to hear about the school right now. Tell me what happened afterwards. And so I'd come back and say my mom picked me up, and we went to Sportorama, and I had my lesson. And he'd say, did you work on your backhand like we talked about? I'd say, yeah. And my mom would be like in the kitchen somewhere, and during these conversations, occasionally, she would just make a noise and shake her head. She'd go, and my dad would grab me, and he'd yank me out of the table, and he'd just drag me down to the room, and he'd say I was lying. And I would be in the room, and then he would go, and he would punish me.
Did this happen every night at dinner?
Not like that.
Were you asked about your day every night at dinner?
Mm-hmm.
Is that yes?
Yes.
And how long would it take you to go through your day for him?
About an hour. Not even. Maybe 45 minutes, depending on how much detail he wanted or how much he wanted out of the lesson. Sometimes he just cut the dinner short and wanted me to talk to me downstairs.
It's almost like he wants an accounting or a retelling of Lyle's every moment of every day, like making sure he's doing what Jose has been instructing him to do, because these are his rules and it's his control. And Lyle's under his control. And so he's got to make sure that Lyle's doing everything that he is telling him to do. So bizarre. Having to come home and tell you every minute of your day to somebody.
Do you have a basement downstairs?
Mm-hmm.
Is that
Yes.
And when you had finished telling him everything that happened during the day, if you did it well, would you get, if you had thought about all the things he told you to think about and done all the exercises the way he told you to do them and had reported it all perfectly, would he show some sort of approval or be happy about it?
Sometimes he would reach and take my hand and say, "That's a good boy."
Just ruffle your hair?
A dog.
Did he ask you about other things at the table besides how your day went and exactly what you did?
Well, after we did the day, we talked about, he basically gave some sort of lecture on things that we had talked about before. He'd talk about battles, and it was mostly historical. He'd talk about the Roman period and generals and the philosophies that sometimes he'd incorporate into the way he was at work with these philosophies and how I should be at school and on the soccer field or with my other people that play tennis, my competitors, and go through different, basically a philosophical talk.
Would he ask you,
Sometimes he'd want it. I'm sorry.
would he ask you questions?
Yeah, sometimes he'd want answers or my response to what he'd said. So I'd give him my response.
What if you didn't know the answer?
Sometimes, if it depended on what the question was, but if I could look it up, he'd make me go find the passages in his little library of books that he had, which was in the other living room. And I'd spend my time searching. If I found it, I came back. If enough time went by, he'd say, just forget about it, just come back. And then I'd come back and sit down, and he'd tell me the answer. Sometimes I would get a lot of answers wrong, and he would just sort of start tensing up and shaking his head, and he'd sort of just explode.
What would happen when he exploded?
He just reach out and he grabbed you. And usually with me, he'd open the sliding glass window and he'd just throw me outside onto the porch. And just close the door.
Get outside.
How long would you stay outside?
A few hours.
This
Hours?
happened only in the summertime?
No. I remember the winter times most.
And
Because then I would go into the nice doghouse they made. It had the wood chips in it, it was warm, and I'd hang out in there.
did you keep any provisions in there for these times?
I did in Pennington.
What did
In
you
Muncie, I didn't.
keep? In Pennington, what type of things did you keep in the doghouse for when you were thrown out?
I kept the blanket that I kept in there always, and toilet paper I kept in there. Sometimes food.
So this is something that went on for most of your life living in the house, is that you'd be thrown outside as a punishment?
Until I was like 17. I don't remember it after that.
Would Erik be asked questions at the table?
Sometimes he would be asked questions. Most of the time he would try to answer a question or something, and my dad would just tell him to shut up. And he was very rough with Erik. Erik just sort of tried to get involved a lot, and that would really upset my dad.
Erik wanted your dad's attention?
He wanted to be part of what was going on. And he would just wander into the conversations. And sometimes my dad, I remember one time that he was in the black chair and I was by the coffee table and we were doing something and my brother sort of just wandered into the area and my dad just hit him across the face. And my brother just went flying into the rug. And his whole face was bruised.
What was wrong with Erik? Why didn't your dad want to pay attention to him? Did your dad say, would he say things to Erik? What was wrong with him?
No, he would just tell him to shut up and go away. And why can't you just shut up and go away? Basically what I remember he would say. And my brother would just, he'd just stand there. And my dad would have to push him away or he would hit him. And then my brother would, like that time, just go cry and try to find his mother.
Did your mother ever come back and say anything to your dad about the way he was treating Erik or the way he was treating you?
No.
Overall.
Do you ever remember any time your mother interfering on your behalf with your dad?
I can't remember any time. Or with Erik in situations like that, in conversations where Dad was really grilling him and being harsh with him, making fun of him. Sometimes my mom would intervene, but not when my dad was violent.
When your mom was making fun of Erik, how would she intervene?
Objection, this takes the testimony.
I'm sorry, when your dad was making fun of Erik, how would your mom intervene? Would she say something to your father?
She would just say his name, Jose. Like he was being a little too harsh with Erik, who just sat there with. My brother just couldn't respond. Just sat there sort of stunned, helpless.
Would your dad stop then? When your mom said, "Oh, Jose," would your mom stop or would he continue?
Objection, this takes the testimony.
Rephrase the question.
When your mom would say something like you've just told me, like, "Oh, Jose," would your dad then stop?
No, he would, no, he would usually stop and be very upset with my mother for saying something when he was talking to his son. And he would say harsh things to her. And sometimes she would cry. She would she would leave. Sometimes she would get very upset too. But usually she would end up leaving.
You said that there were talks in other places. Let me just finish up one more thing with the table. How long did these talks go on? You said you remember them at 7. Did they go on for the rest of the time you lived at home?
The talks
At the dinner
table and also outside the dinner table went on all the way through my life, for as long as he was alive.
Were there also talks that took place in the basement?
Yes,
And did you have a basement both in Muncie and in Pennington?
yes.
And what is your earliest memory of talks in the basement?
Very early, like 6 years old, when I was swimming.
Okay. Now, was this basement that was set up like some sort of a recreation room, or was it an extra bedroom? What, we're talking about the basement.
It was a
Muncie.
recreation room where there would be a couch and chairs
And how would you and your dad sit?
and a ping pong table. He would sit in the higher chair, and I would sit on the couch usually.
How close would you sit?
So he would sit in a higher chair, making himself like more important or above Lyle, making sure that he overpowers him physically when he has these talks.
I would sit kind of hunched over, and my knees would be in between his knees, and he would be hunched over too, and our heads would be touching, and we would talk that way.
And what would he talk about?
Either we went over what I was going to do the next day if I had a match or practice, or there would be something that he was disturbed about, that he needed to. I would repeat phrases, and I would, we basically go over the philosophies that were to correct whatever he didn't like that happened. Like,
Give me an example.
Objection, Vegas testimony.
We're talking about when he's 6 years old. Or if you have an example that's later, just tell us how old.
well, when I was playing soccer on the team with Mr. Gross, with this kid Jerry was playing, and a picture was on the wall at one point. And I believe I was 7 or 8. I'm not sure. And at one point, I had a conversation with Jerry and his dad, and they were kind of, Jerry's dad usually pretty much always came to the games too, and um, he would take Jerry aside after the coach finished talking to everybody, and he would sort of laugh and talk with Jerry, and I would sometimes I wander over in that direction, and my dad would usually call me back, say, I want to talk to you, and we'd talk. One time Jerry's father came over and he grabbed me and said he wanted to talk to me about something. He wanted Jerry and I to get together and practice outside the team and do something. So he was talking to me about it, and I talked to him about it, and then the game resumed. And in the basement, my dad brought it up. He said, you were over talking to Jerry and his dad. And what did I tell you about having friends? I said, he just wanted to talk to me about practicing after Dad. I think it's a good idea. He said, no. What did I tell you about having friends? And then he'd say, let's go over it. And that's when we put our heads together. And that's when I would repeat to him.
What would you repeat?
Phrases from his books. And I would, that time I repeated a phrase, or I would just sit there and he would say, tell me what I told you about friends. And I would say, I have to constantly struggle because there are forces that tear me down, and sometimes they be disguised in the form of a smile or the hand of a friend.
Was that a quote from something?
It was a quote from the book. And he would repeat it, and I would repeat it, and he would repeat it, and then I would repeat it, and he would say, good.
How many times would you repeat it back and forth like that?
A couple times.
And in these talks, when your heads were together like that, if you said something that was a mistake, what would happen?
He would bump my head.
Hard?
Not too hard, just enough. This was very trance-like. I usually had my eyes closed, and his forehead was on my head, and we would just repeat things in this voice. Sometimes his voice would get harder if he was trying to emphasize, or if he didn't like what I was saying, he would just bump my head like that, and I'd try to go back and do it again. And we would do that for a long time.
What's a long time?
Well, in Muncie, it would be like over an hour, I would say at least, because he would take me through the whole match the next day.
How would he take you through the match? Just give me a short example of how that would start out.
He'd say, what I tell you we were going to work on in tomorrow's match. This is very important. I said, just go through it with me. I'd say, we're going to work on serve volleying. And he would say, okay, what are you going to do? I'd say, I'm going to come into net, and then what? And then I'm going to close off the net, and then what? And then I'm going to anticipate where he's going to hit the ball, and then what? And then on the next point, I'm going to not come into net, right? And then I'm going to take the short ball on the rise instead and come in. He said, okay. And then what? I said, in the next point, I'm going to serve volley. Well, why are we doing this? Just throw the kid off. I said, okay. He said, tell me again. I'd say, I'm going to serve volley. I'm going to close the net. And then what? And we go through the whole thing. And he'd say, good.
How many times would you go through it?
Almost like he's giving them, or giving Lyle, like meditations and affirmations and things to do to improve himself mentally and, become more um, intuitive and, trust his instincts and all that. But it's a terrible way to go about it. and to force him into like this weird trance-like state where you've got your knees in between each other's and you're bumping his head when he gets something wrong. Like this is not normal. Which is why we're talking about it because most parents don't do this with their kids.
The matches, he would just do it twice, depending on what it was, or sometimes a couple times. And we would go through my whole strategy, and depending on what strategy I was using. And he would want to know how I'm going to throw my opponent off sometimes.
Let me take you back to going through the match. How long would it take you to go through the match, point by point?
A good part of the conversation, maybe like 40 minutes.
Okay. Were there times that he would also talk to you about philosophy?
Yes.
And did he have a particular book that he liked to teach you about?
Yes.
And what was that book?
That was The Greatest Salesman in the World.
And did he have you memorize substantial portions of the book?
Certain passages I memorized, and
Was this sort
other
of a...
passages were blacked out.
So the things he didn't agree with, he blacked out?
Objection calls for speculation.
Sustained.
Why did he black out certain parts of the book?
Same objection.
Sustained.
Did he tell you why he blacked out certain portions of the book?
Yes, he told me that they weren't relevant. That this was a great author, and he had written a book that was a special book and for everybody, but that only certain passages pertained to me and my ancestors, and basically just certain passages. So those are the ones I memorized.
Do you remember any of them today?
Not too many of them. I remember most of the titles of the passages. I remember some of the passages.
Was there one in particular that was important to him about sheep?
There were two that were important. One was, I will master my emotions. I will be the master of my emotions. Was very important. And I knew that one.
Because Jose was such a good master of his emotions. And Kitty. Neither one of them could control their emotions, or their rage, or their anger, but yet he's sitting here making his son say affirmations over and over again that he can control his emotions. Got it. Okay.
Can you do
The
it?
first part of it by heart. Yeah, it's my. If I feel depressed, I will be master of my emotions. Today, I will be master of my emotions. If I feel depressed, I will sing. If I feel sad, I will laugh. If I feel ill, I will double my labor. If I feel fear, I will plunge ahead. If I feel inferior, I will wear new garments. If I feel poverty, I will think of wealth to come. If I feel insignificant, I will remember my goals. I will be master of my emotions. And this is the same part of the book that the paragraph about friends is in.
Why was mastering your emotions important?
It was really crucial to Dad, and a great sign of weakness to display emotion, happy or sad, as there's another passage I don't remember as well about being too happy, too confident, too pleased with yourself, and to remember your failures and things of that sort. So neither one. Somebody just unemotional that you couldn't read.
What was the advantage to that? Did he explain to you?
Yeah, that you couldn't be read. in the sports context, that's all that would be, not to give away what you're feeling, especially with regards to me, who seem to have a problem with nerves, fear, inability to. Another line I forgot is, if I feel uncertain, I will raise my voice. And that's a problem I had, speech problems, things of that sort. They were very important for me. If I could master these things, I could reach my goals.
And were there also passages in there that talked about people being better than other people, the people who were going to succeed versus the people who were going to fail? The sheep and...
That was also pertaining to friends. That's the passage that we recited most often because it had to do with my ancestors. And that went that I was not born into this world in defeat, nor does failure course within my veins. And then it would go, I am not a sheep waiting to be prodded by my shepherd. I am a lion, and I refuse to walk and to talk and to sleep with the sheep. And I will hear not those who weep and complain, for their disease is contagious, and let them join the sheep. And we would say that at the end of most of our talks in Muncie, and then we sort of didn't say it as much later on. But that was the theme, that other kids weren't trained in the way I was. They didn't come from the same bloodline, and they had this disease of mediocrity, and it was contagious, and to stay away from, and that it was very tempting, and I was a weak person, and I seemed to be tempted for some reason to hang out with other kids, and I needed to remind myself.
It's a sin, and you're not supposed to do it, basically. Like, you're in the wrong for wanting to have friends. How dare you, wanting to be normal?
And so we worked on it.
When your dad talked about the superiority, was this from both the Menendez and the Anderson side, that is both your father and your mother's side of the family, or was this just...
When my dad talked about it?
Yes.
No, he totally disregarded my mom's side of the family.
What was wrong with your mom's side of the family?
Wasn't anything wrong with it. It just wasn't what he wanted me to have in my head. He just didn't think that any of them had done anything of any significance. And my name was Joseph, and that I should pretty much disregard whatever my mother tells me about her side of the family, because it just confuses things. And he wanted to keep things very simple. So I knew basically my dad's history, and only bits and pieces of my mother when she would be telling me about her family.
In these talks that you had, would your dad talk to you about setting goals and meeting those goals?
Yes.
What kinds of things would he say?
He would. My life was structured with little goals, and he would say that we need to set short-term goals, and some of these were like to fix the flaws that I seem to have with walking.
What kind of flaws did you have with regard to walking?
Where's your biggest time?
Rephrase the question.
You said that he talked about flaws with walking. Did you have a problem with the way you walked at
Yes.
some point in time?
Yes.
When?
I still do, I think.
What was wrong with the way you walked?
Just with feet outward.
And besides talking to you about it as a goal, as a flaw to be corrected, how else did he deal with this flaw of yours?
Made fun of all anything like that he made fun of in our family. The walking, he would walk behind me and make quacking noises and say I walk like a duck, and get Erik to make quacking noises.
Would this be done on a public street
Yes?
with people around?
Wow.
Yes.
Did that embarrass you?
Yes.
What other flaws did he set as goals to be corrected?
I'm going to pause it here and just keep it at that. This guy is a total POS. I'm sorry. Some people, the world is better without. Just saying. Oh. Anyways, this has been a pretty rough session. We're just through the first part. We have several more to go, plus cross, so we will get through it. Bear with me. I know this topic is tough. It's triggering. I can see it's triggering for Lyle just talking about it. It's triggering for Erik to hear it. It's pretty um, terrible, the things that they went through, all the trauma, all the stress on their bodies that they went through for those many years in that house, and fearing for your life because your father said he'd take your life if you told anybody. So there's that. And you know your father's powerful and strong and has money and power and, you know, in, in a world of a 19, 20 something year old, it's that your parents are all you have. You haven't really experienced the world yet, so you're terrified and you feel stuck. If you're in an abusive situation, you feel stuck as it is anyways. So um they really didn't have anywhere else to turn, in my opinion. And I think they did what they did out of fear, for sure. Especially after hearing Dr. Ann Burgess and her testimony, I am convinced that that's why they did it. And hearing the boys now, or at least Lyle, you can't fake that kind of emotion. You can't fake the stress and the triggering that's happening in his body while he's still remembering these things. So you can't fake that stuff. Even a total psychopath can't fake emotions that well. So I definitely think these boys were victims of their father, and now they're victims of the justice system. What do you guys think? Please let me know in the comments below, as always. And also, I will see you guys on Thursday for part 2 of the Lyle Menendez direct examination. And I hope to see you then. Bye, guys.